All right. Brian has supported us with turning on the recording. So now that we've gotten the housekeeping out of the way, let's go ahead and dive right in. Hello, everyone. My name is Tanya. My pronouns are she, ella. I'm the grant programs manager at the fund, and I'm really excited to welcome you all tonight and to share this space with you. As I mentioned, we do want this to be an inclusive space and an interactive space, so we invite any and all questions in any format that you would like to ask those questions. Let me switch over to what we'll be covering tonight. So today we'll be giving a brief overview of the fund, and then we'll talk about the funding model and the folks that make the funding decisions. We'll provide an overview of our other grant making programs, not specific to the REF. We'll share our funding guidelines, priorities, and review the eligibility criteria for our programs and for the REF. And then we'll do an in-depth overview of the Racial Equity Fund. I keep saying REF, it's Racial Equity Fund. I will switch back and forth. We'll talk about the history, the mission, the objectives, the eligibility, and then finally, we'll dive into the application itself and we'll go through it. There will be time at the end for Q&A, but as I mentioned, you're welcome to come off mute or put questions in the chat at any point. By the end, our hope for this workshop is that it helps you determine whether the REF is a good match for your request. And just keeping in mind, even if we're not a good match or the REF isn't, the fund may still be able to support you in other ways, including with our other funding programs and with our non-monetary resources that we'll talk about. And with that, I will go ahead and hand it off to Patricia.
Thank you, Tanya. Thanks, everyone. As Tanya mentioned, my name is Patricia Solorio. I am the, I was going to say grants associate, but I haven't been that for a minute. So I'm the associate director here at the Fund for Santa Barbara, and I'm just really happy to be here with you all as well. And you've already met Tanya, so I'm just going to go ahead and introduce you to other folks on our team. We have Brian, who's on with us today, and I'll pause for a moment so he can go ahead and introduce himself briefly. And then I know I'm going to give Liam a quick heads up because he's going to be on our REF review committee, and I'll give him in a moment to introduce himself. So Brian?
Well, thank you, Patricia. Hello, everybody. Thank you for being here tonight. My name is Brian Arizmendi Villanueva. My pronouns are he, him, el, and I am the program associate at the Fund for Santa Barbara for almost a year now, like just a few days, so super exciting. I'm super happy you guys are here once again, and I'm very happy to be in the space with you. But I'll pass it over to my good friend Liam.
Hi, everybody. My name is Liam Gallo. My pronouns are he, him, his. I also use they, them, theirs. If you're gay, you can use she, her, hers in certain contexts. I accept the queer labels as well. I will be participating on the Racial Equity Funds Committee in the coming year. So, and I will be here until 6:50 to answer any questions that you have for committee members specifically. So feel free to do that by Zoom chat or by unmuting.
Thanks, Liam. Liam's been on our grant making committee for going on a couple of years now, but he'll be joining us on the REF screening this year as well. So with that said, Crystal and Eder, our new executive director, and myself are based out of the Santa Maria office, and the rest of the folks in the picture, Andres and Marcos is still with us for a few more weeks, and he's our prior executive director. Alex, Tanya, Kathleen, they're all based out of the Santa Barbara office. And then we'll share our contact information later on, and it's on our website as well.
Yeah, I also just realized I left Marcos's name. I meant to put Eder's name in there, so don't get confused. This is Eder. Marcos is not in the picture. He is still with the fund, but not in the picture currently.
We're very much in transition. So these are our office hours. And we just moved in South County. So that is a beautiful picture of our cottage, which we are no longer at, but we've just moved to 1528 Chapala. So that's the Hutton nonprofit building down the street on Chapala, and we're in Suite 303. So we're hybrid, but we try and have someone, at least one person in once a week, or like every day of the week. So if you want to swing by and say hello, you are welcome to do that. So let's just jump into the history of the fund. So the Fund for Santa Barbara was founded in 1980, and through our mission, the fund advances progressive change by strengthening movements for economic, environmental, political, racial, and social justice. We were founded in the post-civil rights era, and our founders were all supporters and activists of different social justice movements, like the Chicano rights movement, feminist movement, LGBTQ movements, and the environmental movement. And through their activism, they kept seeing a pattern of foundations not supporting activist-led work through politically engaged or politically engaged work. So feeling that, and some foundations still feel that supporting that sort of work can be considered controversial. They were also aware that systems of oppression that exist in the world of philanthropy, and were looking for a foundation that was community driven and would support their work. They did their homework and didn't find what they were looking for, so they decided to create it. They created an alternative model for community foundation based off of the Liberty Hill Foundation and other funding exchange foundations throughout the country, and the fund was born. That said, the first is that we are also a fundraising nonprofit. So unlike most foundations that have a large underwriter or endowment, we fundraise our budget annually and give it out to the community annually. So we have a small endowment, but we're just not we're not just invested in a pool of money. We are very proud of the support that comes from individual donors and community. We ask a lot of questions when we're taking private dollars, and we expect donors to walk their talk so that there aren't any strings attached to the dollars that we receive and give out. I think this keeps us really grounded and in touch with the reality of what it's like to fundraise, like many of you. This is why we doubled our grant making during a 2008 recession and tripled our emerging needs grant in 2020 during the height of the pandemic. The second thing is that we are unabashedly progressive. We don't pretend to be neutral. Our motto is change, not charity. And it's not that we have anything against charity. We think it is absolutely important and critical work. But we believe that social conditions improve most when those who have been denied power and justice lead on their own behalf to confront, challenge, and change the conditions that have been denied by access to justice and equity. If you have a social justice model project, then if you have a social service model project, then this probably isn't the place for you. So again, direct service isn't anything that we fund individually. It can be tied to an advocacy project, but standalone direct service projects are not funded. Our mission is directly looking to support social change projects that address the root causes of social inequities and the underlying conditions and circumstances that bring them about. The last thing is that our activist-led decision-making model. We took the traditional foundation model and did everything we could to make it responsive and directed by grassroots activists. In our model, donors defer funding decisions to activists. like Liam, who's on our grant making committee. Therefore, the thing to know about the fund is that grant making committee are the folks in charge of making our funding decisions, and that they are your audience. And when you're writing a grant proposal to the fund, we encourage you to take a look, and Tanya will talk a little bit more about that, about the folks who are on our grant making committee. So I'll jump into our strategies. So we operate under our 5, well, different people call them different things: strategies, pillars, kind of North Stars. So first of which is grant making and what we're known for and why you're here today. But there are other ways that we support groups outside of monetary support. And that includes our capacity building program. So we build capacity of progressive organizations to help them be bold and effective. We host educational workshops, offer direct consulting, collect and share resources, and maintain a progressive community calendar of relevant events. We nurture coalitions by being a hub for convening collaborative efforts and serving as a trusted table to convene people and groups for strategy, resource sharing, and inspiration, including groups like our Central Coast Immigration Rights Coalition or the Economic Justice Working Group. And our fourth pillar rather is influence philanthropy. So by advocating for more progressive approaches to philanthropy to support community organizations and movement building, we influence other foundations to support the work we do to create more fundraising opportunities for prospective applicants, such as unrestricted funding and access to resources for grassroots-led work. So a lot of times it's about, I like to say it's about growing the pie and not making the pieces smaller. And a lot of times the Fund for Santa Barbara is kind of like a seal of approval for lots of other foundations. So when you're funded with us, it does help open other opportunities. And last but not least, of course, is our leadership development. So that social justice movements and progressive philanthropy sector look like the communities we serve, diverse, intergenerational, and values-driven. This includes our Youth Making Change boards, our interns program, the grant making committee, the board of directors, and our staff. And I'll expand on that a little bit more and say it also includes the investment in grants and our grantees. So I'm going to jump into talking a little bit about our capacity building program. So I want to take a minute just tell you about where you could find more information. I think Brian is going to drop a link for our capacity building program. And I already mentioned that we offer a variety of educational workshop offerings and a variety of resources and recordings on the fund's website. We also partner with other nonprofit with the Nonprofit Resource Network for statewide resource sharing and maintain a progressive community calendar where you can advertise your events. So I encourage you to go to the Nonprofit Resource Network site. In addition, they also have, and I think we'll talk about it a little bit more later, but NPRN also has the Grant Center, which is a great place to research and look at more grant opportunities. And I will pass it to Tanya so she can talk a little bit more about our grant making committee.
Thanks, Patricia. On the capacity building slide, or the capacity building program that we offer, one thing that I did want to just re-elevate is the free tailored one-on-one support for nonprofits, specifically some of you that may be a little bit more grassroots. I highly encourage you all to reach out to our capacity building manager, Kathleen, for any and all nonprofit related questions and needs. She's a great resource, and it's a resource that we have available in addition to monetary support. So Switching gears, the grant making committee, which I know we already elevated Liam, who you also see in the picture here, and then in terms of what the grant making committee mentioned, or what Patricia mentioned about the grant making committee, which is that we use an activist-led participatory decision-making model that fully empowers the grant making committee to make the most effective use of the resources that we are able to fundraise and distribute. And this means that fund staff like myself and Patricia don't have the authority to make grants and funding recommendations. Those are solely selected by the grant making committee members. This in turn frees staff up like myself, Kathleen, Patricia, Brian, to be able to provide technical assistance and support to applicants. And hopefully that helps you think of staff as an ally in your approach to the GMC. The images on the screen are of our GMC at large. I do want to distinguish that the REF GMC is comprised of GMC members that you see on the screen, as well as community members not pictured. Patricia already elevated Liam, so I will skip through that part. But what I did want to mention is that the GMC is an inspiring group of volunteers, all volunteers with deep roots in our communities. I know, I think I saw Connie here. Connie was part of our GMC, REF GMC last year. She can speak to that as well. And so they're volunteers who, with deep roots in our communities. They represent the entire region from North County all the way to South County and everything in between. And they provide a range of expertise and firsthand knowledge on issues that affect our community. They are community activists who are on the ground doing the work and understand the of, by, and for approach to supporting historically marginalized communities. And again, they are your audience. And we believe that knowing your audience is an important part of writing a successful proposal. Soon, they're not quite up on the website yet, but soon you'll be able to visit our website and learn more about the folks who are on the REF GMC and the work that they do in the community. Let me switch on over. So now we're going to switch gears a little bit and focus on the grant making at the fund specifically. And first, we'll talk about some of our funding programs, not the REF, but we do want to elevate these. They are available to you all, and we just want to make sure we're dotting all our I's and crossing all our T's. We know you're here for the REF. But first, I did want to share about the single year general grant program. This is our most commonly known one. And I will say you are the first to know tonight that starting in 2024, that program will be offered once annually. As opposed to being offered in the spring and in the fall. The maximum request for that for tax exempt organizations and fiscally sponsored organizations that have a significant funding history with us will be $20,000 now, and new applicants and unincorporated groups will still be able to request up to $10,000. The length of funding for that is 12 months. It doesn't change the other funding programs. The only thing I do want to elevate is because the multi-year program runs concurrently with the fall cycle, they will now be running concurrently together. So our multi-year program will be running at the single time as the single year general grant program next year in 2024. I know that's a lot of information. We will be pushing out a lot of information through our socials and our listserv. So you don't have to memorize this. I just wanted to elevate that for you. Since you're here tonight. The other program we have available is the Emerging Needs Grants that's offered year-round until all funds are expended, and the request for that is up to $5,000 for unforeseen circumstances. The length of funding for that is 3 months. This is a rapid response type of request, and the other is our Youth Making Change program. The request for that is up to $3,000 specifically for youth-led programs and initiatives. If you all here tonight have youth components in your organizations, please keep this funding opportunity in mind and consider applying next year. The cycle has now closed, but it typically opens in August, and the funds are awarded the following March. So in just a few months, you'll be hearing who is being awarded this cycle for the Youth Making Change program. And I will hand it back to Patricia to talk about our field of interest funding programs.
Okay, thanks, Tanya. So we do have two field of interest funding programs. And so field of interest is just a fancy way to say that money is raised for a specific issue area. As you know, we don't have initiatives through our general cycle or our other funding programs, but the REF is one of the field of interest funding programs, and it is a partnership with the County of Santa Barbara. It's a maximum request of $100,000 for up to, or for 12 months. So it's up to $100,000 for 12 months. The funding program is available to organizations and groups that address anti-racism through systems change strategies. So I just want to, I'm going to say that again, because that's what you all are here for. The REF program is for organizations or groups that address anti-racism through systems change strategies. So organizations have to already be doing this work. New initiatives will not be considered. We also do not, we won't consider internal organizational DEI work. That is not part of the eligibility for this work. So if you're looking for internal DEI work for your organization, like board training or staff training about DEI, this is not the funding program for that, but we can certainly give you information about the capacity building grants that are available through other organizations. Our other field of interest fund is the Mickey Flack Social Housing Fund. For organizations and groups advocating for and actively leading social housing justice campaigns in Santa Barbara County. So there are 4 different funding categories that groups can apply under. It is open year-round until funds are exhausted. Groups interested in applying for are subject to initial screening by fund staff. The maximum request is up to $5,000 for up to 12 months. And information about all of our program offerings is shared via our email list. So I encourage you to sign up for our listserv so that you don't miss any future funding opportunities that become available. And I think Brian is going to drop a link so that you can go ahead and sign up for our listserv if you have not already done that. And then again, I'm going to elevate NPRN's Grant Center, and we'll drop that in the chat as well. It's just a list of all, I think it's pretty thorough, of all the grant opportunities in Santa Barbara County. And so I encourage you to explore the Grant Center. So we're going to talk a little bit about what social change means. So in order to be eligible for any of our funding programs, all applicants must meet funding guidelines and priorities, which have a reoccurring theme of social change. So before we get into those, I'm going to talk about how the fund defines social change. So at the fund, we define social change as change that addresses the systemic root causes of social, economical, environmental, political, and racial inequalities in an effort to alleviate those inequalities, but also the underlying conditions and circumstances that cause and sustain them. Projects with a strong social change component will be working to change the set of conditions that keep the social issues in place, societal issues in place. So typically, we think of this in contrast to charity or direct service projects that provide a service without addressing the root causes of the issue. Think about the food bank versus advocacy for a living wage ordinance so that people can actually afford to purchase their own food, or offering music lessons versus lobbying a school board to allocate money and institutionalize a music program for all students. For the REF, we have a focus more on the educational and awareness component of social change, since applicants cannot use funding for any direct lobbying or advocacy. This does not mean that projects cannot educate and create awareness in their constituency about inequities in the systems. So the REF is just a little bit different in that because they're county or government dollars, they prefer that those dollars are not used for direct lobbying. That said, we know that there are no black and white line about what constitutes direct service versus social change. Sometimes the most basic charity work is actually social change idea, depending on what else is happening in the community. There's work that we support in Santa Maria that maybe we wouldn't support in Santa Barbara, depending on what the context is. So there are direct service projects that are tied to advocacy. Maybe an advocacy group uses direct service to build a base and then use that base to mobilize around community organizing. So that's a little bit about what social change is and kind of what makes us a little bit unique and different. So that's it. I'm going to jump into the funding guidelines that all our applicants must meet in order to apply for funding. They're available on our website, so I encourage you to peruse our website. You'll notice that these tie back to our mission to support progressive social change, work that addresses the root causes of social inequities. We are very intentional in the language we use to highlight the type of work that we support. You'll want to make sure that you are familiar with the guidelines and make sure that your project addresses or aligns with at least one. They are available on our website and you'll see them repeatedly addressed throughout the application process. I'm going down the list really quickly. You'll see that we invite applicants from organizations that actively support anti-discrimination based on race, sex, gender, age, religion, language, spoken or immigration status. This list is not exhaustive. We invite applicants from organizations supporting any anti-discrimination work. Social justice issues are not monolithic, and we encourage proposals that are intersectional and inclusive. We invite applicants that actively support communities marginalized by power structures to engage in dialogue and actions that seek to counter social injustice. So examples of these are trainings for parents, youth, and farm workers on how to realize their power to affect change on issues that directly affect them. We also encourage applicants that actively work to improve the rights of workers and their families whose living conditions have been marginalized. We'd also like to see applications that promote cultural life of underserved communities and support the activities of cultural workers. Supporting groups that bring light and joy and richness of marginalized and underserved communities is an essential part of the work the Fund for Santa Barbara does. Examples include the Guelaguetza in Santa Maria, Juneteenth in Santa Barbara, and MLK celebrations throughout our county. And I also want to highlight the last part of that is to support activities of the cultural workers. We encourage folks to honor cultural workers by paying them for their work. I know that sometimes we just make assumptions that they would just be happy to do it because they're artists, but artists also have to eat and pay rent and do all of that. So we encourage you to do that. We also want to see applications that promote self-determination and leadership development in low-income and disenfranchised communities. We're committed to removing barriers and providing support to folks with lived experience and centering the people that are most affected. We also would like to promote global peace and organize locally for just policies. This includes educating and creating an awareness of how global and national issues affect our community. Examples include issues like women's reproductive rights, climate change, and gun control. And last, we invite proposals from organizations that work on building coalitions to enhance improving environmental justice and address climate change, especially organizing a constituency, usually without access to decision makers. Engage in a collaborative action and coalition building to strengthen movement ecosystems. We believe that a key component of real change is movement building, and we strongly support coalition building and cross-movement solidarity. We're not prescriptive about it, and we're not saying that you have to be collaborating or involved in a coalition work, but we do want to see that you are aware of other organizations that are doing similar work. And then moving on to working against community violence and actively support recovery and restorative justice activities and initiatives. And finally, we want to invite proposals from organizations that operate in a democratic manner, responsive to and directed by the constituency being served. So, and to us, that means that folks directly impacted by the injustices should be involved in the strategy and program development and have a decision-making capacity. The key here is that we want to support constituency-led work. This can include senior management, staff, communities, etc. So that's, I want to elevate that part because that is something that I think the grant making committee looks especially close at. And so again, these guidelines are available on our website, and I encourage you to take a look at those on our website. Those were our guidelines, and then we have our priorities. And I want to elevate these and share them with you because our grant making committee uses these as they're reviewing proposals to kind of ask themselves these questions. So basically, do they meet the guidelines that I just went over? Does this project have the potential to create or advance social, economic, political, and or environmental change? They're asking, does it align with the fund? And in this case, the REF's values and mission. And then they're looking at the priorities. What are the elements of community organizing, lobbying, direct action? So we're going to we'll modify that a little bit because we can't have lobbying and direct, we can't have direct lobbying and, maybe they wouldn't be happy with direct action either, but definitely we encourage you to build your base and have that base ready to mobilize through other funding that you might have available to you. And so, of course, we want to see that there's coalition building or possible legal. Oh, no. So no legal strategies. Sorry. This is new for us because we really like legal strategies. But in this case, the county is not about it. But we do, I think that it's still important to talk about what are the root causes that your project addresses. So again, all the asterisks that you'll see on this on these priorities is because the funding comes from public funds and can't be used for direct lobbying or legal strategies or 50C3 C4 work rather. We have been able to fund C4s through the REF funds, but their work needs to be really focused on C3 work, right? So more the education piece. So the REF committee will also look at access to funding as well. So does this project lack access to traditional funding? Would the project go forward without support from the fund? So given our social change rooted agenda, the GMC prioritizes groups that lack access to traditional sources of funding or that use strategies that are typically overlooked by mainstream philanthropy. Again, the GMC is going to ask themselves, what is the funding trend for this type of work? they'll take into consideration whether the nature of the project is so new or controversial that its chances of receiving funding elsewhere might be limited. A good litmus test for the priorities is if you have funding from 5 other foundations for the same project, chances are this probably won't rise to the top of the priority list for our grant making committee. Critical timing. Does this organization have the capacity to reach its social change goals? Are the key players familiar with other organizations in the same field to further the goal of movement building? And how clear is the budget outline? So I do encourage you to have your budget match your narrative. So how well does the budget support the project's social change goals? And will funding help start up the organization, stabilize the organization, or leverage other funding sources? So again, startup organizations won't be funded through REF. I know I keep going back and forth and we're going over our funding priorities for our overall grant making programs, but I just want to elevate that. Regional equity. So we also are looking at regional equity. Will this project help the GMC achieve its objective of providing equity throughout Santa Barbara County? The key is to remember that we support projects with a strong social change component, which I shared more about earlier. This is what we do. This is what we do fund, and now I'll go over a little bit about what we won't fund, even though I think I've talked a little bit about that. So things that we cannot fund are political campaigns that support a candidate or a political party. So we do, through our REF, we can fund C4s, but not C4 work. So not any lobbying or advocacy. Through our regular grant cycles, we can fund both C3 and C4 work, and we do fund lobbying or advocating for ballot measures, with the exception of, like I said, the REF. So we don't fund private interest, direct labor organizing, direct support to individuals, building improvement, capital ventures, machines, office equipment, that sort of thing we do not fund. Projects located outside of Santa Barbara County. And even that, there are exceptions, like if there's an organization that's based outside of the county, like let's say Ventura or Los Angeles, but they have work that they do locally in Santa Barbara County, we do fund that type of work, but the impact needs to be seen here in the county. I'm going to take a quick little pause because I see Liam's hand up and I want to make sure that he has a minute to ask the question or make a comment or talk about something that I maybe forgot.
I did want to make a comment. Can we flip back to the last slide? I think the priorities are maybe the most vital thing for you all to internalize out of this discussion. I feel like the fund attracts really capable social change makers. So my feeling is that everybody in the room is going to be qualified for some type of social change. And what I want in applications, what I want to review in January is very accurate pictures of people's social change initiatives. I want there to be as little confusion as possible. And so I really like for your projects to be aligned to these priorities and like spoken about on these terms. It makes it extremely easy for us to discuss your project if that's the case. I also want to assure you all of the kinds of people that end up in the room talking about these projects. I'll say it again, the fund attracts capable social change makers. And so those are the kinds of the people that are on the committee. Please word your applications as though you're talking to a peer, a colleague, a coworker at your organization, and keep that passion that you have, that excitement about your project when you're putting it to paper so that we feel it too. This kind of work is exciting, and it should be optimistic, idealistic, and a little dangerous. And we want to, it's kind of hard to convey that on Microsoft Word in 12-point font, but you can do it, and I want to see it. So I have
Absolutely.
I have 3 more minutes, so I'll be here if you want to Zoom chat me anything directly.
Thanks, Liam. Yeah, we absolutely do not want you to censor yourself. I think that we want to encourage you to write your grants as though, you're talking to your peers, as Liam said. I'm going to keep us moving along. On slide 18, where there's also our eligibility criteria. So in addition to meeting our funding guidelines and priorities, all applicants must meet our eligibility criteria. So here are the general qualifications that all applicants must meet to be eligible for funding from any of our grants programs. So first, as we just covered, all applicants must meet the funding guidelines and priorities. Applicants must have a tax ID if applying with a tax exempt status or with a fiscal sponsor. If you're applying as an unincorporated group, so I think someone had that question. If you're applying as an unincorporated group that does not have a 501c3 or C4, you will need an EIN number. And I think that in the application on the portal, there's a link that will send you to instructions on how to do that.
Correct.
So you must have and that said, you must have an organizational bank account, or use your fiscal sponsors. You must not, you can't be currently funded by the fund. You can, in this case, for the REF, if you are funded currently through our general cycle, you can apply for the REF. And vice versa. Your budget and planned activities must fall within the funding timeframe of your request. So for the REF, the funding period is 12 months. All budget and planned activities must fall within the 12-month timeframe. We do not fund retroactively. So if you're writing a grant and the cycle is from June to May, then you can't ask for funds for the prior May, right? It all has to fall within the funding cycle. And finally, we'll go into our general grant making. I wanted to elevate that you can find an extensive list of all of our projects that we funded in recent history on our website. This can give you an idea of the type of work that we fund and help you understand a little bit more about the types of requests that fit our guidelines. And so we also have our past REF grantees listed. So you can go in, and that helps you kind of determine if your project might be a good fit.
Yeah. Thanks, Patricia.
You're very welcome. Thanks.
So I know that was long and that was a lot, but it is a good foundation for folks who, especially newer folks who don't quite know us or haven't been funded by us, to really understand like the building blocks of how we get to the REF. And everything that was shared is relevant. All grantees or all applicants must meet the funding guidelines, the funding priorities, with that exception that the county has made and be eligible to apply. So all of that information is still relevant for you. This section now will move into specifics of the Racial Equity Fund. Again, feel free to come off mute, ask questions, raise your hands, whatever feels most comfortable to you. So first, we wanted to share a little bit about the history of the Racial Equity Fund. The Racial Equity Fund of the County of Santa Barbara, that's the full name of it, is an initiative that came directly from grassroots organizing by Black femme leaders in Santa Barbara County, who demanded that the County of Santa Barbara invest in Black community. In the wake of the killing of George Floyd in 2020 and then the ongoing racial justice movement. At their behest, the Santa Barbara County Board of Supervisors, who we'll just call the county, passed a resolution declaring racism as a public health crisis, and then made a commitment to racial justice and pledged $500,000 to address equity issues in the county. Then roughly half of those funds were allocated internally to the county, and then the leaders who had been lobbying for this funding went back to the county and said, you know, that wasn't the ask, and they lobbied again to have the funds distributed to the community. That's when the Fund for Santa Barbara was selected to distribute the remaining funds through our community-led participatory decision grant-making process. And this cycle will be our third cycle funded by the county. This funding program would, of course, not be available to us today had it not been for the labor of the Black femme activists who lobbied the county. And we want to elevate that so that you all know that. And we are honored to be trusted to continue to be dispersing this funding. I'm switching back and forth between slides, so bear with me. Next, the REF mission. So coming up with the mission was an exhaustive collaborative effort that included both GMC and community members. We at the fund like to say that we are unabashedly progressive, but sometimes bureaucracy makes the unabashedly part difficult, as you saw Patricia navigating our priorities to get us here today. And so it took a lot of strategy and sometimes uncomfortable compromises to get to this point. The group really had to grapple with a lot that was tough, right? It was tough. And we want to thank the community for their patience as it took a little bit longer than expected to get us here today. But now we're on our third cycle, and all we need is for the county to allocate more dollars. So keeping the original intent of the activist ask in mind, the mission of the REF is to invest in and strengthen organizations that address anti-racism through systems change strategies in Santa Barbara County. This fund aims to affect the culture and policy for systemic change necessary to advance racial equity and justice and reverse the legacy of slavery and the effects of racism in Santa Barbara County. As you can see, the mission of this funding program is much, much more specific than our general funding mission and our overall funding programs. This mission was specifically designed to honor the community ask and the history of the program and the people who played an integral role in making the opportunity a reality. We hope that this program is the first of many investments on the path to reversing the legacy of racism and the effects of racism in Santa Barbara County. The REF has a specific set of objectives that we are looking to fund. And hopefully us going through it will help you understand more about the types of requests that will fit the Racial Equity Fund. So the fund aims to provide organizational capacity assistance. That was one of the main objectives of the program. And what that means is to support strengthening the ecosystem of diverse anti-racism organizations in the community that share a common goal to address the cultural and systemic effects of racism. This can mean collaborative work, coalition building, supporting groups that are working together, in addition to individual organizations doing this work on their own. We also want to increase participation of historically marginalized communities to influence civic matters that impact our community at large. And this is everything from local engagement to engagement that goes beyond our immediate community, but would still have a significant impact nearby. We want to develop the pipeline to uplift historically marginalized leaders to positions of decision-making power. A huge part of the racial inequity in this county and in the country has to do with who the leaders are and where they come from and who holds the positions of power. So through this fund, we would like to help shift that. We also want to increase and sustain investment to strengthen organizations led by historically marginalized, organizations that have been historically marginalized and have lacked access to capital. This means addressing some of the inequities inherent in the philanthropic world, as Patricia has already mentioned, and in the nonprofit organizations where folks of color and marginalized communities lead and have a greater disparity and access to philanthropic support. And we also are trying to address and work to change systemic negative narratives about the legacy of slavery in the community. And lastly, this objective is a meatier one, and it's broader with a lot of components as well, but it will hopefully help you think about the work that you do and if it's a right fit for the REF. So we want to establish and advance organizational capacity in historically marginalized organizations in the following areas, which is leadership development, advocacy, policy change, legal analysis and research, strategic communications, alliance and community building. And then again, going back to the advocacy, policy change, and legal analysis, I know we're harping on this. REF dollars cannot be used for direct advocacy or lobbying, but education and awareness about issues is allowed. Legal strategies like paying for attorneys is not allowed. Analysis and research are. So I know we're getting into the weeds, but we want to just lay it all out for you so that there's no confusion. And then where did I leave off? Organizational development, community engagement and organizing, innovative and continuous learning, and then finally, develop organizational and programmatic objectives, conduct evaluations, and assess outcomes. So that is, in a nutshell, the work that this specific program is trying to elevate and fund. In addition to these objectives, there is an additional eligibility criteria specific to the REF that is a lot more niche than our general funding programs. So first, the applicants must be historically marginalized organization. They must also support community members directly harmed by racist policies and marginalized by systemic racism. Must include as a core mission the goal of addressing systemic racism. Projects must take place in Santa Barbara County. Patricia already mentioned the exceptions that have been made, but really the work has to be on the boots. The people with the boots on the ground have to be in Santa Barbara County. All applicants must have a tax ID number or an EIN, as was previously mentioned, and have an organizational bank account. And I will reference these as I'm going through the application in just a moment. Before we jump into the application, I wanted to give you some more information about other capacity building resources that we have available to you all that we hope you'll take advantage of. One is the optional proposal review. And what this is the opportunity for prospective applicants to have their idea or their project proposal reviewed ahead of submitting the application. And what you would need in order to take advantage of this opportunity is a one-page max summary of your proposal. Tell us what you're trying to accomplish, a list of the key organizers and participants, and then a draft of the budget. And you are able to submit this all the way up until a week before the deadline of the application, which is January 22nd. So we'll have this opportunity available up until January 16th at 5 p.m. And you can take advantage of this by submitting this via email. Brian is dropping the email in the chat. And again, I encourage you to take advantage of this specific opportunity if you're having trouble determining whether your project meets the funds guidelines and specifically the REF's guidelines and criteria.
And I'll pop in really quickly and just say that if you do it way before January 16th and email us and just want to hop on a call, sometimes it's just easier to kind of work it out in a conversation about whether it's a good match. But that takes a little bit more advanced. Like you don't email at 4:45 on January 16th for a phone call.
Thanks, Patricia. And then the last thing before jumping into the application is the cycle timeline that I wanted to share with you. This timeline is already up and available on our website for you all to download and just have with you as you navigate this process and await a response. But just going through it very quickly. Of course, the RFP opened on the 13th. Tonight is the 29th. We're here for the grant application workshop. The optional pre-application review deadline will be January 16th at 5 p.m., as I just mentioned. The actual application deadline will be on January 22nd, the following Monday. And then the County Board of Supervisors will hopefully be approving the funding recommendations early March. We're looking at March 5th. And then once they do, then we'll make the public announcement on March 6th. And then the grant award celebration, this date actually has recently been changed, so don't commit that one to memory. We'll provide an updated date at a later time. And then just so you know, there are 2 grant reports that are going to be due with these grants should you be selected. There's a progress report due at 6 months through Submittable as well. We send out an email when those are ready to be submitted, and then a final report due at the end of the 12-month funding term. And again, through Submittable, we'll send an email to remind you all to submit that. 2 important deadlines. Again, January 16th, optional pre-application review, and January 22nd, the application deadline. The application deadline, I do want to elevate. It's January 22nd at 11:59 p.m., not 12 a.m. If you submit at midnight, it will be too late and it will not let you submit. So 11:59 is the cutoff, but I don't encourage you to wait until that time to submit. We are well in advance. I think we have about maybe a month and a half or 2 months. So please try to get them in beforehand so you're not struggling, and worse, you don't encounter any technical issues, which, you know, technology can be quite finicky sometimes. All right. We have an entirely electronic, oh my gosh, I just went through it. An entirely electronic grant process that you can find the link to apply on the grantee portal. I'll show you how to do that in a second. And then from there, you'll be redirected to our online grant portal, which is housed in the Submittable realm. And in order to apply, you will need to create a free Submittable account, and the account email that is used to create that account will be our main point of contact with you. So use the email that you use within the organization, use the email that you check often, and is related to the project that you're applying for. And then I do have to say our grants platform works best on Google Chrome, Firefox, and Safari. Internet Explorer is not supported. If you are using Internet Explorer, I apologize. You'll have to use a different browser. But there are some benefits to having the the process be electronic, and one of those is that you can collaborate with as many folks on your team as you'd like. Once the person who will be submitting the application creates the original draft, there will be a button where you can manage collaborators, and then you can invite your colleagues to support you in drafting the proposal. There's also an autosave feature that allows you to save drafts and come back to them whenever you want, in addition to having a manual save draft button that you can also click on and then save and come back later. And I'll show you all of that once we get into the proposal. I will say, even with autosave, and because I know how technology is, we do encourage you to draft the narrative portion, which is the meatier portion of the application, on a separate Word doc, because we do not want your work to get lost ever. And technology is just, I will just say it is finicky. So if you feel comfortable drafting it on a separate Word doc, I encourage you to do that, and then just copy paste it into the platform. And lastly, if you find the application to not be accessible to your specific needs and would like technical assistance, please contact me. grants@fundforsantabarbara.org. We can troubleshoot, I can walk you through it, and we can offer alternatives if necessary. All right, so with that, let's go ahead and dive into the application itself. I may have to stop screen sharing depending on how it goes, but this is how you would go find the application. This is our homepage. You would click on Grantee Portal, and then I think I probably stopped screen sharing, so give me 1 second, because I clicked on it, and then I lost it. I'm telling you all, technology. Give me 1 second.
May I ask a question?
Of course.
Um, for the last year, the last cycle, first of all, thank you very much for having this. My name's Kim Cochran. My question would be is, how many applicants did you have last year and how many were granted? So we have some sort of basis on the competitive nature. Are we competing against basically 10 or 40? And this is all last year. I get that. I get that, or the last cycles.
Right. That is a great question. So because the REF is so niche, it tends to not get as many applications as we would in the general cycle, but it is still a very competitive cycle in that we just went through all of the objectives and the eligibility criteria and the priorities and the guidelines. So we are very specifically looking for the projects to meet all of those. So I will say it's still a competitive cycle. We do get less applications, and depending on how much funding is requested, we can fund anywhere from 5 to 10, 15. I think typically each cycle we've only funded about 5 to 6 because they're larger award amounts.
Yeah, so like our total budget is 235,000, or it's like 233,350 or something like that. And you can apply for up to 100,000. So if we get like 2 very compelling $100,000 proposals, then right, it's all gone in. So I mean, because it's such a large amount. Yeah, but what Tanya said is typically is correct. Like we've been funding about 5 or 6.
Does that answer your question, Kim?
And we've been getting about 10 to 12 applications. Is that correct, Tanya? More or less?
Yeah, more or less.
On
I
average.
anticipate more this cycle.
Yeah.
But yes, that has been the trend so far. Okay, back to the application. I clicked on grantee portal. We navigated to the grantee portal. And then if you were going to apply, you would come here to click on apply now. That timeline that I showed you is linked here, both in English and Spanish. I will be making the update to change the date for the grant award celebration, but other than that, it's still an accurate timeline. You would come here to click apply now. This is where you're redirected to our submittable page. Again, we have the funding guidelines and priorities and our mission. You can read through those, scroll to the bottom, and then actually, I just realized I am not sharing the right thing. So 1 second. We're so close to the end, I promise.
Yeah, but we can answer questions as she's poking around technology. I'm so glad Tanya does this. I would be lost in the. Hi, Connie. Yeah.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Not so much a question as just maybe a bit of a comment. It might help with a little guidance. Since I did get the opportunity to read the last time,
Yeah.
I would say, having read through so many different things, that really, like, I can't say enough about how important it is to follow those guidelines.
Yeah.
Because reading things that were like, I don't know, the work is not centered in a community and about community where you're addressing anti-racism work. So here's what I mean. Like a museum proposal, quite frankly, but it's not really addressing anti-racism work. It's just a nice idea that looks like it's supporting people of color. And so I think that large organizations too really have to be careful this way, because sometimes it's like, oh, well, we're going to do something like all of a sudden for, Black youth, but it doesn't have anything to do with the center of your work, and you never have. And so it feels like it's a little tacked on, like all of a sudden you're going for like, hey, what is this? And so it really, this gives the opportunity for organizations and groups, and I will say groups, that have been centering themselves on trying to uplift in this way with anti-racist work. And so, all those like little fuzzy ones, I called them fuzzy ones, where it was like, well, I don't know. And so the clarity too in writing, like the clarity, be very direct about what it is. Because there was a lot of times where, you're kind of, everybody's kind of going, I'm not sure what they mean. So you don't want people to interpret. Be very specific. Be specific. Because if you're not, then people are they're trying to give you the benefit here, but well, we don't really know what you're talking about. So just a word of encouragement to please be direct and please be centered in things that are directly doing anti-racism work. I mean, really. And that there's a connection of what you're doing to the communities most marginalized in this county. Please think about that when you put these proposals out there.
Thanks, Connie. I think I can't, she put it beautifully, but I think be explicit. Unlike our general cycle, we don't have site visits. So we're not going to have an opportunity to sit down and have a conversation with you to get clarity on your proposal. So be explicit. Do not be shy. One of the things, and I'm going to elevate this one more time. I already talked about it, but we will not, this is not for new projects. So if you haven't been doing anti-racism work and it's not part of the kind of the goal of part of the goal of your organization, and then you just kind of developed a project to meet the guidelines, that I don't, just please know that's just not going to fly. It's not the grant making committee has done a good job of kind of elevating or just kind of recognizing that it is a new project. And also I'll elevate the DEI internal board and staff training. That is not a good match for us, but I am happy to, if you want to email me, I'll give you links to other funders that can provide that capacity building. Okay. Thank you, Connie.
Both. Thank you both. That was great. And yes, thank you, Connie, for elevating that. I think that's a very important point to make. We do encourage folks to be very explicit in their anti-racism goals. Okay, back here. So, you're at Submittable, you scroll down, you want to apply for the REF. You can click here on this caret for guidelines, and then you'll see the REF specific guidelines. And then you can go ahead and click apply when you're ready. Let me see. Yeah, okay. It's okay. I already logged in through the back, so we're good. So then once you're logged in, this is what you'll see. You'll see the application. The first thing I want to bring to your attention is that we have the dates, the grant period. So it's April 2024 is when these grants would be dispersed through April 2025. It's a 12-month grant. And grant funds must be expended within that 12-month funding term. We have a link here to take you back to our website for the funding guidelines and priorities. There's also a link to excuse me, download that application checklist. The application checklist is a tool that I've created to help you prepare for applying. And depending on whether you're an unincorporated group, a fiscally sponsored group, or a tax-exempt organization, there's going to be different things you need to prepare, and you can see those here, and that's available both in the application and on our website for you to download and tick off as you're drafting that. And finally, we have a link to the REF mission funding strategy and eligibility. It's also available on our website, but we linked it here for you so you can have it nearby and be extra prepared to apply. And then not seeing the button to invite collaborators, but typically the button to invite collaborators would be somewhere around here. I think it's because I'm on the back end as an admin that it's not showing it for me, but you'll see a button that says manage collaborators. And once you have drafted the original version of the proposal, whoever is going to be submitting it, you can invite as many collaborators as you'd like. And the button should exist right here. The other thing is that there are word limits noted on the bottom right-hand corner that you can look at throughout the application. Anything marked with the red asterisks is going to be required, and you will not be able to submit until everything with the red asterisk has been completed. And finally, in addition to the question itself, we have I have drafted clues to get at the meat of what the question is trying to get. So use these clues. They are there to guide you and to support you and to give you extra context. And then finally, the application does allow for rich text editing. And what that means is that you have the ability to bold, you have the ability to underline, to really drive your point across. You can even click hyperlink things that you want the GMC to be able to look at as they're reading your proposal. Okay, so the first part of the application is going to ask about general information. And the very first question that we have is asking you to draft an executive summary of your proposal that addresses the following 4 things: the start date of the project, the mission of the organization, what the proposal is seeking to accomplish, and what the funding would specifically pay for. We ask that you write this in third-person present tense form, paragraph form. And as a pro tip, I actually encourage folks to come back and draft this at the very end after you've completed the rest of the application and you have a clear understanding of what the request is. This is an executive summary, and this is shared with our board of directors and with the county board of supervisors as well. Moving down, we'll ask for the contact information. So this should be the same person who created the application from the start. It's going to be the person who will call the submitter. First, last name, title, email, phone number. Moving down is the organization information. We'll ask for the name of the organization, and we ask that you enter it the legal name of your organization or group. And if you are applying as a fiscally sponsored organization, please don't add their information here. We'll ask for that separately. This is specific to your organization or group, and it should be the legal name that matches your bank account. And we'll ask you to give your request or your project a name, just to ground us in what we're about to read. And then we'll ask whether or not your organization has tax exempt status, which is 501c3 or 501c4. If you are a tax exempt organization, you can click yes. Then we'll ask you which criteria you fall under. And then we'll ask you to give us your tax ID number. If you are not a tax exempt group, you can click no, and then we'll ask you if you are applying with a fiscal sponsor. If you are a fiscally sponsored organization, you can click yes, and then we'll ask for the fiscal sponsor's name and their tax exempt status. Now, if you are not a tax exempt organization and you are not applying with a tax exempt or with the fiscal sponsor, then you will select no, and then you'll have the opportunity to apply as an unincorporated group. And here you'll see if you're applying as a where is it? Oh, you can only apply as unincorporated if you not have a fiscal sponsor, but once you click on unincorporated, then here are those tools that Patricia had mentioned earlier. So if you're applying as with unincorporated status, we'll ask you for an EIN. Here's the link to the website to apply for an EIN if you don't already have one. And then we'll ask you for a statement of charitable purpose later on in the application, and I'll show you where that would appear. So here you'll either put the tax ID number or the EIN, depending on whether you're a tax exempt organization or an unincorporated group. Then we'll ask you for your organization address. where you carry out your work, where you are located. And then we'll ask you if you receive correspondence at this address. If you do not, if you receive correspondence at a PO box, for example, then we'll ask you for the mailing address as well. And then if you are applying with the fiscal sponsor, then we'll ask you for the fiscal sponsor's address as well. If you are not applying with the fiscal sponsor, you will leave this blank. And then we'll ask you for your organization phone number, your organization website, if you have one. If you're a grassroots group that does not have one, that is okay. That is not a required field. Social media, same thing. If you have a social media handle that you would like to share with us, you're welcome to do that. It helps the GMC get more context, but it's not a required field. And then finally, we'll ask about who the check should be made out to. This should be your organization bank account. Again, we do not make checks to individuals. And if you are applying with the fiscal sponsor, here you'll include the fiscal sponsor's bank account, since you will not have one. And then the organization bank account financial institution, we don't need like the routing number and the account number and all of that good stuff. We just need to know what branch you are banking at. Moving down, and I know this is a lot, so please pause me if anyone has any questions. I can no longer see people since I'm screen sharing, so just chime in.
I'm answering some questions on chat.
Okay, thank you. So moving down after the general information, we'll get into the request specific information. First, we'll ask for a brief summary of what the funds will pay for. Again, we ask that you write in third person present tense. It's a brief sentence really, or two, about, well, I guess it's like 3 sentences that you can squeeze in there, about what the funding will support. And then we'll ask you for the amount that you're requesting. For the REF, the maximum is 100,000. You do not have to request the maximum. Remember, if you're requesting 100,000, then you will have to show us how you're going to spend the 100,000. But you're able to ask for up to 100,000. And then grant funds must be expended within that 12-month funding time frame. And then any unused money shall be returned to the fund unless an extension is approved. And then the type of request that you're requesting, whether that's general operating support or it's specific to a program or a project. And then we'll ask you if the request has received funding in the past. If it has, lovely. We'll ask you when that was. If it has not, you can say no and move on. And then the total request budget. So this is specific to the proposal. So if you're asking for funding for a specific project, then this will be the project budget. If you're asking for funding for general operating support, this will be your organizational budget. The request budget period start just when your fiscal year starts, when your budget starts, and when it ends, and then the organization annual operating budget. At this point, if you are applying requesting for general operating support, the total request budget and the organizational operating budget will be the same amount. And then we'll ask when your fiscal year starts. Going down more so into the request specific issue areas. Here we have a list that you are able to click on. However, if your work is not reflected in this list, you can select other and then tell us what issue areas you are hoping to address. We do have a note here that says, please refrain from selecting choices that do not directly apply to the proposed request. Sometimes people get a little click happy and we end up with the whole list being selected, and sometimes it's not conducive to specifically uplifting the work that you're trying to do. Use commas to separate, you'll see that there. Request specific strategies. These are the strategies that you intend to partake in as you are carrying out your work. Again, if the strategies that you plan to use are not reflected here, you can select other and then tell us what those are. The constituency, this is the constituency that you intend to support with this request. If the constituency that you would like to serve is not on here, you can select other. And then finally, the geography. So if the project or request is gonna be carrying out work countywide, you can select countywide and move on. However, if you are an organization or group that is based in South County, for example, then you can select South County instead. I know that some folks have in the past selected countywide because they want to be doing countywide work, but they're not actually doing countywide work. So this is specific to where the work is taking place for this request, not what you would like to be doing. And then this is the meaty part. This is the request narrative that I mentioned, and this is the one that I recommended drafting on a Word doc, because it is much meatier, and we don't want any of your work to get lost. For the application portion, narrative portion, we want you to focus on the specific questions that are being asked and draft succinct answers, and more to Connie's point, be clear in what you are requesting and what you are trying to convey. I really encourage you to break down the questions and specifically answer what is being asked, and don't get lost in the weeds. Remember that the GMC have to read all of the applications, and you don't want them to have to sift through fluff words. You want them to be able to articulate why they support your project. So you want to be clear and concise. And for best practices, avoid using acronyms. I know Liam said like a colleague, but there are times where the acronyms just go over folks' heads. So no acronyms, but yes, like a colleague. The first question is going to ask you about the organizational history and mission. This is your opportunity to tell us give us all the background information and lay out the foundation for your request. Remember that the REF funding eligibility calls for applicant organizations to include the goal of addressing systemic racism as a core mission. So talk about that a little bit here as well. And then the second question is, keeping in mind the REF's priorities as stated in the guidelines, how is your organization addressing systemic racism? You know, we've harped on it pretty strongly. That is part of the eligibility criteria. So make sure you really understand the guidelines, the objectives, and the eligibility for the REF, and talk about the strategies you are employing or plan to employ to address systemic racism. Be very explicit. This is, again, echoing Connie. Be very explicit about how this request is addressing systemic racism. The GMC will prioritize projects that are in line with those with that criteria. Next is keeping in mind the Racial Equity Fund's priorities as stated in, wait, I just read that, sorry. Describe how the funds will be used to enhance and address the root causes of issues directly impacting historically marginalized and disenfranchised communities' capacity. Remember, we're looking to support projects with a strong social change component. Here you'll want to connect the dots between the social change component of your request and how you are addressing the root causes, in this case, of racism. Remember, we are looking for systems change relating to root causes and systemic and institutional racism changes. And then next, we'll ask you if you are working with community partners and how you would describe that relationship. We talked a little bit about that. That's part of our priorities. We want to see cross collaboration. However, we're not being prescriptive. If you are not working with others, that's okay too. But if you are, you'll want to connect the dots and tell us how you describe that relationship. We want to see how you're partnering with other organizations doing similar work. And this question is really asking you to show that you know the community and the other players in the field doing the similar work. Moving on, we'll ask you to describe your organizational structure and governance. Tell us how decisions are made and priorities set for your group, and how your constituency is involved in the decision-making process of your project. So talk about how involved your constituency is in the decision-making process and how they affect the work that you do. The GMC will look at whether this is a top-down project or if you're engaging the constituency and incorporating their voices in every step of the process. We are looking to support constituency-led work, so this is where you want to make sure you're highlighting how your constituency is informing the work that you are doing. Next, we have the activity timeline. We have it set for April 2024 to April 2025. This you'll fill out in here. We'll ask, you'll tell us the month and the year of the activity, the objective, and the activity itself that you're trying to do. And a good way to think about or differentiate between the objective and the activity. The objective is what you're going to do or hope to accomplish, and the activity is how you're actually going to do that. The activity should help you achieve your objectives. And the activities and objectives should support the narrative of the proposal. As you're completing your activity timeline, I also encourage you to be thinking about your budget. And if you are able to, work on these side by side and connect the dots between the two. As you're identifying the activities, think about how much each activity is going to cost, so that it leads you directly into your budget in a natural flow. And then I'll go over the budget in detail, but for now, just remember, your budget is your activities in another form. It's your activities in dollar form. And then we'll ask you what your anticipated outcomes are and how you'll elevate the effectiveness or impact of the project within your proposed timeline. For this question, think about what is going to be different by virtue of you being able to carry out this request. What is the change that you seek to make, and how will you evaluate whether or not that change took place? What is going to be different in the organization or in the constituency or in the community by virtue of you conducting this request? Applicants get to set their own determinants of success. Again, we're not being prescriptive. Your evaluation can be simple. It doesn't have to be elaborate. Any pre and post information is going to be helpful to give the GMC an idea of what the shift that you expect to see. They can be general goals, but we do encourage you to be clear, realistic, and feasible. And then we'll ask you how the request benefits / outcomes will strengthen your organization's mission, or how your organization will keep the benefits ongoing, or for how long. Here, talk about how this request relates to the overall goals of your organization, articulate how it relates to your organization's mission, and connect the dots for the GMC. And then the request does not have to be ongoing, but if it is, tell us how you plan to keep the benefits ongoing. Moving on, we are at the financial information part of the proposal. First, we'll ask you what resources aside from funding your organization has access to and needs. Tell us what resources you have been using, you have had access to. Here, you can flex your muscle about what kind of community buy-in you have. For example, how does your board participate in this request, or who are your advocates and your supporters for this request in the community? It doesn't have to be monetary support. It can be in-kind donations, like a constituent lending you their space to host a meeting. This is, again, your opportunity to flex your muscle on how you've been resourceful and creative with the resources that have been available to you. The flip side of that, tell us what resources you need. It doesn't necessarily mean that we'll be able to address all of the needs that everyone has, but it does help us advocate for you on your behalf with other foundation partners. We can say, hey, this is what the community is telling us they're lacking, and it helps us be able to make those asks a reality, or be one step closer to doing that. This can be something like board onboarding and training, or any kind of different workshop that you would like to see. If you have a specific technical assistance need, you can always just go ahead and reach out to our capacity building manager to get personalized support. And her email has already been shared, but I think Brian can probably drop it in the chat one more time. And then the second part of the financial information section is going to be the budget table. So the budget table is divided into two sections. The first section is the income section, and the second section, when you scroll down below, is the expenses section. The first section is the income section is where you'll put your sources of funding for this specific request. Remember when I said that your activity timeline should correlate to your budget? This is where you're going to translate your activities into dollars. Let me see. The table is set to auto sum in the amount column, D column. So as long as you're not adding any special characters like commas or periods or dollar signs, it will be automatically tallying up for you here. And then this financial information table is specific for the request you are submitting your proposal for. If your request is for a specific program, then this budget table will be for that program only. However, if your request is for general operating support, then this will be your total organizational budget. I do have a sample linked here that is going to be available to you as you're completing your financial information table, and I want to open it. How do I close this side thing? I don't like it. That doesn't help me. Well, now I flipped it. See, technology. Let me zoom in a little bit. So this is a sample that I have made for you, and this one is specific for general operating support. The top is, again, the sources of funding that you have. Here I just added some grants, some donations and contributions, and then a fundraising event. This total income is going to be my total organizational budget. In the yellow here, you have possible funding sources that are available that you can include in here. And then again, it tells you if you're applying for general operating support, this is your whole organization budget. And if not, it's just specific to your project. I'm really sorry about the black left thing. I hate it and I don't know how to get rid of it. Let me see if this helps. Oh, I did it. Okay. The second part of that is the expenses section. And here, again, this is your activities translated into dollars. There are some samples that you can pull from. There's personnel, staffing, wages, stipends, benefits. But the key is to be very specific in the explanation of the expense category so that the GMC doesn't have to guess or try to figure out what you're requesting and what is going on. There's other sample categories that I've added. And again, this whole sample is linked in the application, so you can click on it and review it as you're completing it. But before I go back to the application, as I mentioned, it will tally up. Don't add the commas or the dots or the dollar signs, but it will be tallying up, and the total income here must match the total expenses amount here. And notice how that is well above the 100,000 that is available in funding. In this case, this one is for 10,000 because our general cycle funds 10,000. So the amount requested from the fund for the specific item should be listed in this column, and then the total amount that the item is going to cost you should be listed in this column. So in this column, my request is adding up to the 10,000 that I would have been requesting from the fund. In your case, it'll add up to whatever amount you're requesting, and then the total expense amount is beyond what we are able to support. If you are doing this correctly and these two are adding up and matching, this zero right here will automatically calculate and balance out at zero. And let me show you what that looks like in the application. If I find the application, here we go. So total income here is going to be tallied up. Total expense amounts is going to be tallied up, as well as total requested from the fund is going to be tallied up. And then this zero down here is going to be calculating whether or not the budget is balancing out. And once you complete your budget table, this should be left at a zero. it'll ask you whether or not the total income and total expenses amount matches and balance out at zero. If they do, great, you are done with that section, you can move on. If they don't and you say no, it will ask you to go back and do it. Make it match. And sometimes it's really simple as simple as somebody included a comma somewhere that they weren't supposed to include. But I wanted to elevate that for you. So let's say we'd said yes, and then it's asking you again to confirm that the total amount requested from the fund does not exceed $100,000. That's this number here. Whatever your requested amount is, should not exceed that 100,000. Once you confirm, you can move on. And then, oh, something I didn't mention, in your budget, in your expenses, in your expense category section, I encourage you to list things as they are a priority to your request. And we will also ask you to give us your top 3 highest budget priorities here as well. And then finally, for the financial information, we'll ask you for past funding sources for this request. Here we'll just ask you to include dates and amounts and where the request came from. It could be grants, events, or other fundraising activities that you've employed for this specific request. And the bottom part is the additional information section. So here is that request for a statement of charitable purpose for those of you applying as an unincorporated group. This is where you'll give us the statement of charitable purpose. Here is where you can click to learn more about what we're looking for to answer this question. If you are applying as a tax exempt organization or a fiscally sponsored organization, then it'll request something different, and I wanted to make sure that I elevated that. Sorry, I'm probably making folks dizzy. So first, everyone will be asked to submit a list of all the key participants involved in your project. Name, title, role, key responsibilities, and demographics of this person. And then we'll ask you for a list of the board of directors or the governing body of your organization. If you are a tax exempt organization, it's your board of directors. If you are an unincorporated group, it's your governing body that we're looking for here. And then if you are applying with a fiscal sponsor, we'll also ask you in this section, it would have popped up to include the list of the board of directors of the organization that is acting as a fiscal sponsor. So just keep that in mind. We'll request that as well if you are applying as a fiscally sponsored organization. And then we'll ask you to share with us whether or not, if at least half of the organization's leadership reflect the community being served. Again, the fund is looking to support constituency-led work, and we are looking to see whether the constituency is reflective in the leadership. And you can click on some of the ones we have provided, or you can select other and give us more information. Oh, I lied. Here's the board of directors for the fiscal sponsor. If you are not applying with a fiscal sponsor, it's not required, so you can skip it. And then for tax exempt organizations, fiscally sponsored organizations, we'll ask you to upload a copy of the IRS tax exempt determination letter. There's a sample of it linked here so that you know what we're looking for. And if you are applying with a fiscal sponsor, then you would include the fiscal sponsor's tax exempt determination letter. Similarly, we'll ask you for a copy of the State of California Franchise Tax Board determination letter. There's a sample of it here that you can click on to see what we're looking for. And again, if you are applying with a fiscal sponsor, then the fiscal sponsor's letter will be what you will be uploading here. Then we'll ask you if you have an organization logo and would like to share that with us. Your organization logo is not required, but if you have it, go ahead and upload it, and it helps our comms team elevate your work. Moving down is the optional attachment. This will be asking you to upload a document of your choice that helps the grant making committee understand your organization and or the request better. It's not required, but we wanted to give you the opportunity to share anything else that you'd like to share with the grant making committee. And finally, we made it down to the end, which is a disclaimer and agreement. So here you're just going to certify that the information is true and accurate to the best of your knowledge, your full name, your date, that's your signature. And then we'll also be asking you to send an endorsement request to a member of the board of directors if you are a tax exempt organization, or a member of the board of directors of your fiscal sponsor if you are a fiscally sponsored group, and finally a member of the governing body if you are an unincorporated group. And all of that is outlined down here for you. I will let you know that you don't have to wait until the very end to send this request. You can send this request at any point, and I actually encourage you to send it sooner rather than later, so that once you submit your full application, this isn't pending, and you're not having to track down the person that you sent it to submit it on your behalf. Down here at the very bottom is where you would come to save your draft of your application. Whenever you need to, take a step back, come back to it later, you can click on this button here. At the very end, when you have completed everything in the application, this button will become available for you to click, and you can submit your application that way. And that is the bottom of the application. So I'm going to pause. I threw a lot out. I have not seen the chat, so I don't know if I've missed any questions, but I do want to give folks a moment to ask any questions if they have any.
Yeah, thanks so much for putting this together. This is really helpful. So a couple of questions. One, I'm just curious about the funding award amount, and if applicant requests a certain amount and you would like to support the project but at a lesser amount, do you all move forward with that, or is it, if what you're willing to provide doesn't match the application, then you just kind of move on to the next, or how does that work? That's one question. And the other is just about the recording, and where that'll be made available, be sent to attendees. I want to share with some colleagues.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Nolan. Those are great questions. So to answer your first question, yes, if the applicant is requesting an amount larger than what we're able to fund, we would base our funding decision on the priorities that are listed here and here. And then the other question, or the other answer to the other question, is the recording will be made available on our website where you registered. Let me see if I have the website still open. I don't, but it'll be made available in the grantee portal. Any other questions?
Well, I just, as we're pausing for questions, I just want to thank Tanya. She works really hard on this presentation. It's very, very thorough. And I know that we're throwing a ton of information at you. And if you think of questions later, I encourage you to shoot an email to grants@fundforsantabarbara.org for technical difficulties. I would ask that you all start with submittable for the platform issues, and then, for issues related directly to the application, we can answer those questions again at grants@fundforsantabarbara. So big shout out to Tanya for, again, her amazing work in putting this presentation together, and just the thoroughness.
Thank you, Patricia. And yes, and if you need help contacting submittable, I have the contact information, so you're welcome to reach out to me and say, hey, there's something weird going on with the platform. Can I figure this out? Can you send me the contact information? Depending on what it is, sometimes I can troubleshoot it, sometimes I cannot. But I'm happy to support you nonetheless. Any other questions before we end tonight? I know it's been a long night, and I just want to say thank you for sticking with us. We try to make it short, but there's so much information. So we'll work on shortening it, and just say thank you in the meantime for sticking with us. I hope I was able to answer your questions. My contact information is here. You're welcome to reach out to me at any point with any additional questions.